Why is physics sick? Sabine rants on the problem. Still the same stuff, she says. And of course, Bergson tried to warn them, but to physics, Bergson doesn't exist. So let's take a look. I get the urge to make these commentaries on symptomatic stuff by folks who are actually visible on YouTube, like Sabine. So hence Sabine's recent self-described rant. She sets the context by referring to feedback from her last video and says, to quote, "This is a typical academia story that illustrates so well what is wrong with the foundations of physics. We're endlessly arguing about the same irrelevant questions. This is why physics is dying." In my video, I explained why Brian Keating wasn't quite right when he explained this experiment was trouble for loop quantum gravity. I'm not sure what the experiment is, but we're not going to worry about it, which is the main competitor for string theory. I said that because for decades there's been two different schools of thought in the field of LQG, one of which, represented most prominently by Lee Smolin, has insisted that the theory can be tested with upcoming experiments. The other, represented by Carl Rovelli, is fine with the theory being untestable for practical purposes. Continuing, so now the situation is either the theory is falsified or it's not falsifiable. It's exactly the same crap as with string theory, or supersymmetry, or inflation, and dark sectors, and many other research baubles in the foundations of physics. And the list is long. Then she says, it's mathematical fiction. It has nothing to do with reality anymore. I don't understand why people get paid for doing this. So where have we heard this before? Well, there is the list of my little talks on the subject based on Bergson, who, as I noted, doesn't exist for physics. So she says, okay, I think I need to explain why that argument is wrong, because indeed, you never heard any of this discussion. 20 years ago, Carlo wrote a paper with Simone Speciale, in which they claimed that LQG did not have an issue with Lorentz invariance, that is, the symmetry of Einstein's theory, because of the angular momentum operator. And she shows this article, and indeed the abstract says it is sometimes argued that this minimal length, that is, the Planck length, must conflict with Lorentz invariance, because a boosted observer could see the minimal length further Lorentz contracted, so it couldn't be minimal anymore. So let's take a quick look again about what she means by the symmetry of Einstein's theory and Lorentz invariance. In the special relativity framework, we've got our observer. He's stationary, he says. His clocks are synchronized. Two bolts strike, bounce off the mirrors, hit the clocks exactly at 2 o'clock. And he says these are simultaneous, the two lightning bolts. However, there's another observer, observer 2, and he says, in reality, observer 1, you're in motion. And therefore, your clocks are not in sync. Therefore, the lightning bolts aren't actually simultaneous either. And he says, in order to correct things in your system, your reference system there, we have to apply these Lorentz transformations for time and distance. With these, time units expand in proportion as length units contract. So, not simultaneous in that system. And however, given these transformations, the law D equals Vt in observer 1 system is now D prime equal Vt prime. In other words, the same law, whether in the moving system or the stationary system. The law is invariant. Nice. However, the symmetry, which is equivalent to the reciprocity. Observer 1 says, sorry, observer 2, but you're wrong. You're in motion. And since you're the one in motion, I apply the Lorentz transformations to you. Same result. Perfect symmetry, reciprocity. Same gloss on the twin paradox. Exactly the same thing. The Earth is stationary. The rocket twin is moving. The rocket twin is aging less. The Earth twin aging more. However, by symmetry, the Earth twin can make the same claim. The rocket, that is, the Earth twin is in motion. The rocket is stationary. and this Dirac twin is aging, perfect symmetry, reciprocity, hence the so-called twin paradox. The math, one should note, is all special relativity gives for explaining this retardation of physical processes, as in human biological aging, or clocks slowing down, or muons living longer with velocity. That's all you've got. Those math, not any physical model whatsoever. Keep that in mind. So she says, you see, the issue is that in LQG, areas of space become quantized. They take on discrete values. The smallest area that you can have, which is proportionate to the Planck length, he says 10 to the 35 meters, just for comparison. She says that's much smaller than a giraffe. A little Sabine humor. Now, what I said in my video is that a minimal area isn't compatible with Lorentz invariance. It just isn't, because length contraction would make that minimal area smaller than minimal. Proof by contradiction, Math 101. So what she's saying, of course, is if I place my Planck area there on the bottom with observer 2 in motion, or actually stationary, and I apply the Lorentz transformations, the little Planck area has got to shrink because it's part of that x-axis. There's no way that the shrinkage can't occur. That's what she's saying. De Carlo, she says, he solves that issue. Quantize the momentum operator. The spectrum of eigenvalues is discrete. So we see there in loop quantum gravity, the minimal length, more precisely the minimal area, does not appear as a fixed property of geometry, but rather as the minimal non-zero eigenvalue of a quantum observable. What changes continuously is the boost transformation. In the boost transformation is not the value of the minimal length, it is the probability distribution of seeing one or the other of the discrete eigenvalues of the area. So the spectrum of eigenvalues is discrete. And she says, I tried to tell them long ago this can't work because I think she says deviations would be so large that we would have seen them already. They don't want to hear that. There are still people writing papers about this nonsense. She goes on, it's just so frustrating. They're still discussing the same nonsense as 20 years ago. You can fix the problem with Lorentz invariance and restore the symmetry exactly. But then you'd get back areas of size 0. And then you'd have to show you get all the great regularizing properties that supposedly come from having that minimal Planck area. And for all I know, no one has ever done that. She says, what happens is that everyone just repeats arguments that they all know to be wrong, to keep the money coming. These people sit on tax-paid positions with no other task than producing useless papers that no one understands. The fact is, this great so-called research has been going on for 4 decades, and what's come out of it besides papers? Nothing, nada, niente. It hasn't taught us anything about nature whatsoever. And then she says, I don't know how it ever became accepted that inventing some math and thinking it's real came to be accepted as theoretical physics. It's insane. This is interesting because there's 2 possible motivations. She's saying it's all the money. The other possibility, which I kind of think is the case, is that they just don't see this. They just don't see the problem. I've run across too many that just don't see the problem. The special relativity brainwashing of current physicists on display here, both sides, Sabine, her opposition, is boggling. Number 1, preserving Lorentz invariance, or symmetry, that is the reciprocity of reference systems. This is the logically consistent special relativity, but then SR can only explain measurement effects. SR cannot be used to explain real, ontological, physical effects like slowing clocks. Again, take our Michelson-Morley experiment with the ether flowing against the apparatus. We'll put our toaster there along the x-axis, or equivalently, we could put that little blank area there. Same difference. We'll use the toaster. I use a ruler. Under the yellow ruler, it's 6 inches long. A different ruler, same length, but marked differently. Now it says 9 inches. So now the toaster is 9 inches. So the toaster expands or contracts depending on the ruler. Nothing physical is happening to or in the toaster. In special relativity, the rulers are light rays and clocks, synchronized clocks or not, depending on the observer's motion, or what the observer is willing to attribute to himself or another observer, in other words. See AP French, the book Special Relativity, 1968, page 114, for this terminology, measurement effects. I say that because I've encountered physicists that don't have a clue what I'm talking about. What do you mean by measurement effects? This measurement only construal is required for physics explanation, so-called of Michelson-Morley, and therefore the supposed destruction of the ether. This apparatus arm is not actually physically contracting per special relativity, per Einstein, and this is what physics accepted. Actual contraction via electrodynamical model was Lorentz's ether-based hypothesis. That was rejected. So you cannot have an actual physical contraction within special relativity. So the question is, why are you worried? To Carlo Rovelli. In special relativity, none of these effects are real in the first place. The toaster isn't actually contracting or expanding, nor is the Planck length. But you're acting like special relativity's effects are real, that little Planck square is actually contracting. It is not in special relativity. They're real outside special relativity. They're real effects. Special relativity cannot be used to explain them within its logical, consistent structure. Number two, if you are accepting the symmetry as above, you have no explanation now for the actual physical retardation of clocks, as via the clocks and the jets of Havlicki, or the increased lifespan of muons with velocity. Special relativity cannot be used to explain these. You need some other theory, not special relativity. Some theory likely based in the ether, as did Lorentz. The Lorentz transformations are compensatory. Time units expand in proportion as space units contract, as we saw. They are of the same order. They have to be of the same order. You cannot say the time retardations are real, that is, the twin really ages less. The space contractions are only measurement effects. Again, the measurement of construal is required for physics explanation of Michelson-Morley. You can't have your cake and eat it too. As Bergson noted in the theory of relativity, the slowing of clocks is only as real as the shrinkage of objects by distance. The transformations are compensatory. So special relativity is a purely logical mathematical structure with no physical explanatory power. It contains no physical model of anything, at least as they're trying to use it. But the physicists insist, via the supposed experimental confirmations such as Havlicki, that it is explaining the retardation of biological and electrochemical processes. And SR gains this respect for this. But SR again provides no physical model of these retardations whatsoever, and further and worse is being invalidly used given its logical structure to explain, quote unquote, these real ontological effects. And physics just won't give up on this. But these transformations, that's all you've got. You only have these compensatory equations, which either observer can apply to the other. Frankly, physics is in an unbelievably bad, huge loss of face, sociodynamic ego trap. Why am I saying that? Because if they accept the logically consistent special relativity, its, quote, confirmations, experimental confirmations are gone. Special relativity starts to collapse. The realization comes. We have no theory of these real effects. the slowing down of clocks, the retardation of the increase of lifespan of muons. Then special relativity as the explanation, quote unquote, of Michelson Morley starts to die once it's looked at more closely. Then the century-long ether overthrow story and all the hoopla involved with Einstein is over with. Add problems with Einstein's theory of the photoelectric effect, noted by Schrödinger. The ether, I'm going to add, just for the heck of it, is not the Dirac sea. I repeat Sabine's statement. I don't know how it ever became accepted that inventing some math and thinking it's real came to be accepted as theoretical physics. It's insane. Well, special relativity's pure abstractionism is an integral part of the malady. It's surely arguable just when this malady started. Einstein was simply carrying on what was already started. I pointed to one time point which seems significant. We started out with Newton and his gravitational equation, but he was still cognizant. He understood. He didn't have an explanation of gravity. He said, I feign no hypotheses as to what gravity is. I only have a mathematical explanation, to paraphrase. That started to transform. Euler-Lagrange is the key point. We start explaining how, say, if we drop a garbage can through a gravitational field, it takes a certain path of motion, thus the Lagrangian. And therefore we keep the Lagrangian, which is a constant difference between the kinetic energy and the potential energy, minimized. We throw that expression Lagrangian into the Euler-Lagrange. This is incredible mathematics and became extremely, shall we say, cocaine-like for physics. This, I think, is where it began. When you look at it, you really don't have yet a physical explanation of gravity whatsoever. You're using abstractions like potential energy, kinetic energy, keeping them minimal. That transformed yet to general relativity, which was nothing but the geometrization of Euler-Lagrange. It is just further mathematization in terms of geometry of Euler-Lagrange. Newton would still say, I feign no hypotheses. Nothing's changed. But look at Sean Carroll in his book, The Biggest Ideas in the Universe. This is a vivid illustration of the idea that gravity really is geometry. That, in other words, the physical is the mathematical. Again, I don't know how it ever became accepted that inventing some math and thinking it's real came to be accepted as theoretical physics. Well, I think you're looking at the evolution of it here. She notes the only two people pushing back are Eric Weinstein and Peter White, and both of them are pushing their own theories of everything. So she's frustrated. Well, of course, Bergson is ignored. He had tried to correct the special relativity version of the malady in his argument with Einstein over the twin paradox, where already Langevin was construing special relativity as explaining, implying that the twin should really age less than his brother. And also in this book, Duration and Simultaneity, he'd already laid out the profound metaphysical basis of the illusion and its correction in terms of mindset and creative evolution. But to physics, Bergson, quote unquote, has been just a very bad word, and I've encountered this. So, in my opinion, the rants of frustration are just beginning. So next, we'll see, again, for more discussion on this, and especially AI, but AI in this context of the problems of physics. Take a look at this book. Till then, signing off.